Good afternoon to all our attendees in the Philippines and in the region, and greetings from the Philippines. Welcome from all our attendees around the world. Welcome to the Rainforestation Cagayan de Oro River Basin, a session under the theme, Building Resilient and Fair Societies. I'm Anadel Cabanban, the head of Office of Wetlands International Philippines, and the convener of this session. On behalf of my convener, Adrian Rimescott, project manager of the Reach to Coast Rain to Top project, or R2C, R2T, welcome to all this session. Rainforestation is part of Work Package 2 for reducing the risk to flooding. This package is a tripartite partnership among Hineleban Foundation Incorporated, Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, and Wetlands International Philippines. The objective of this session on rainforestation in the Cagayan de Oro River Basin in the Philippines is to share the approach that the Management Council and its partners, particularly the Hineleban Foundation Incorporated, in building resilient societies by supporting rainforestation for forest restoration in Lirongan, Bukidnon in Mindanao, and promoting financial landscape investment from various sources for forest restoration through integrated river basin management. In sharing the collaborative approach among the indigenous people, private sector, multi-stakeholder platform, and non-environmental, non-governmental organization in one river basin in the Philippines, we hope that at the end of this session, to have inspired resource managers and stakeholders of the 17 other major river basins in the Philippines and around the world to work more closely with communities living near forests, including indigenous peoples, with the stakeholders, with the private sector in the river basin, and with the public, private, and academic sectors downstream, and build resilient and fair societies. To achieve this, we have prepared the session in two parts. Part one is to provide context for rainforestation in the reforestation of Cagayan de Oro River Basin in Mindanao, Philippines. Dr. Hailey Ann Kiawit, the Executive Director of the Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, a multi-stakeholder platform, will provide the background and strategy for integrated river basin management in the Philippines to reduce the risk to disaster. We then watch a video on rainforestation and how this approach is implemented by the Hineleban Foundation Incorporated, the social arm of a fruit plantation company with the indigenous people living near the buffer zone of a mountain national park. We will hear the message of the River Basin Control Office of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or the RBCO. This office is mandated by the government of the Philippines to put in place integrated river basin management in 18 major river basins in the country for the sustainable use of water resources. Part two is an interactive part. I will moderate a forum between the audience and three panelists, Ms. Georgia Perrine from HFI, and Dr. Kiawit from Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, and Mr. Guy Simons, a hydrologist of Future Water. They will provide more insight into the components of restoration, that is, the replanting with forest with the community, PS or payment for ecosystem services for restoration, and the use of hydrological modeling to guide the restoration in a river basin scale. The closing remarks will be given by my co-convener, Engineer Adrian Rimescott from VEI, the Dutch water operators. So let's get started. Dr. Kiawit is the Executive Director of the Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, as just mentioned, as well as the Senior Manager of Work Package 2 of the Reach to Coast Rain to Top project. She will provide the actions taken by the stakeholder downstream of the river basin from tragedy to conservation. She will provide the context of the Reach to Coast Rain to Top project and introduce payment for ecosystem services in work package 2, reducing the risk to flooding. And this is her talk. Dr. Hailey.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anadel. And on behalf of the members of the council, good afternoon from the Philippines. And thank you for listening in. Okay, I'm going to tell you of our story here in the Philippines, and I'll fly you to southern Philippines in our island of Mindanao. And we are the largest island in the Philippines, and our CDO River Basin is located here. Our basin is funnel shape, so it's we need an ecosystem approach to deal with anything on environment, and we have the downstream city of Cagayan, which is the northern hub and industrial gateway. So when we do ecological assessment, we do it with the lens of an ecosystem. Why? Because we have the perfect recipe for disaster. We have our two very steep headwaters, and we also have barren slopes and denuded headwaters, which with increasing rainfall now is actually causing, because of the varied upland activities, flooding and a number of erosion that, sorry about this. And we have this flow of sediments from the upland to the midstream and down to our coastal areas, which eventually also will affect the marine productivity. And as you can see, the plume of the eroded materials here. So what we did is we are focusing on the regulating services to reduce flood and erosion and eventually disaster in the future. So before this tragic incident called Typhoon Sendong in 2011, we have already come up together, and we are called the CDO River Basin Management Council. And we're comprised of around 60 organizations coming from different sectors. And we operate by having 5 co-chairs with regional governments under handling environment, governance, agriculture. And we also have the co-chair from the city, who's the downstream impact area, and the church, because in the Philippines, we really take seriously our environmental stewardship. We are operating based on technical working groups ranging from rehabilitation, governance, community development. And we have a new one on payments for ecosystem services, as well as a group that handles international and national partnerships, especially funding agencies, while we have the media that promotes our advocacies as well. We have already our theory of change. So we have a roadmap on where to go. And in particular, we have 3 main strategies. One is on the interconnectivity of the landscape, seascape, as well as the restoration of high-risk areas in conjunction with providing livelihood as well to the people who are doing the restoration. So in particular, in this restoration, we have a unique project with the Dutch Sustainable Water Fund with BEI, where they recognize not just hard engineering in ensuring water supply, but also restoration of the environment. And there are a number of aspects which have been described earlier, but I'll talk more on the investment mobilization under this work package. So our multi-sectoral group acts like a funnel to coordinate all these financial sources for all our landscape investments. So we are like the coordinating body. And in particular, I'll talk more about the payments for ecosystem services that we're doing. Restoration needs finances. So what we did was we came up with a number of restoration models such that we ensure that the protection of the environment is there, but also that the people doing it will also get profit in terms of livelihood. So the 3 Ps. And we've costed at the per hectare so that when we go to business and other partners that are willing to do landscape investment, they would have an idea how much the cost is per hectare, as well as how much of the release will be for the first 3 years that they will support this restoration. And of course, we ensure that this restoration model has already a piloting or a demonstration site that has been working with a partner consultant to ensure that this is really a working model. So this is an example of one model called the riparian buffer forest restoration. And we have done this in our one in the adjacent river basin, and you can see with the support from the Partners for Resilience program, Manglito here is very happy to see that what used to be a very eroded riverbank is now filled with the grass and the intercrop fruit trees at the background. The other model is what we call as the cacao farming, where we package the intercropping with the indigenous trees with a cacao, and we have partnered with a commercial entity, and similarly we have this packaging. And this is an example again of after 3 years showing the fruits already of the vegetation on the slope. The other model, Kauyagan, will be discussed more later by Georgia Perrine, but here it shows ecological succession using calandra. And again, an intercropping of a number of variable commercially species. And here it shows Manang Linda showing her appreciation to the rainforestation, especially getting income from the root crops and the adlai that she has planted as part of this design. So in terms of payments for ecosystem services, we have a number of modalities that I will go through. And some of these are based on the LGU, some are non-LGU. So just to point across that what we did was really sort of address the different elements of a PES. So in this case, it is a river basin-wide PES where we have the upland indigenous groups that are doing restoration work in their ancestral domains in providing water to the downstream area and eventually reducing flood, while we have our buyers coming from the city. But in this case, we added a third party, which is the Savior Science Foundation, to act as the fund manager and intermediary between the investor and the indigenous groups. The other model is it's like a social investment fund for the indigenous groups that's protecting one of our headwaters, Kitanglad, and it's called the Talamak Fund. It's basically working again with some of the industries that are in the uplands to provide a social support, health support for the KGBs, we call them. Another one is a good model for business organization working with a local tribal group. And in this case with Unifruti, and you have Mr. Perrine here, and the daughter Georgia will be one of the discussants. Here they have arranged with a local group to come up with a support in terms of the use of their land in the provision of water and irrigation for their banana and pineapple plantation. So they made a sacred compact on this, and this has been ongoing and still doing good until at present. This is a new one that we have come up. This is with the water district in the city, the main provider of water. And here we were able to successfully lobby the company to allocate annually around 4 to 6 million pesos to ensure that the restoration of the watersheds where they are getting the waters are really set. And here, this is an example where a company that's supplying water is also recognizing that the water it gets from is not coming from its pipes, but really from the environment, and thus rewarding the environment for providing that water that they can pump. The other model is now on the local government units, and if you look at the map, we have 4 local government units, and this is for the downstream city called Cagayan de Oro, as mentioned. And here we were able to successfully lobby for the local government to allocate 10 million pesos a year for the restoration of the watersheds, not just within its city jurisdiction, but in the entire river basin as well. And we've put in here that we really work with a local champion, a legislative champion, to put this ordinance across. And here we've put in the name as well, Councilor Ian Nakaya. For the upland municipalities, this is for Libona in one of the headwaters where they have successfully again come up with an ordinance. And here it's based on the water tariff, and they will use this to support one of the headwaters, Kitanglad Range, which also is providing water, as well as some of the areas are already converted into agro-industrial areas. And we have our local legislator champion who really work with us on this. The other one is on the local government unit in the other adjacent watershed in Kalatungan, and they're quite early. They've been doing this, but they are reviewing again their old ordinance because it was again on water tariff, but they have to improve their water service provision. And so we have a long way to go. If you look at this map, the greens are where we have our existing restorations already, and the red ones are the high-risk areas that we still have to address. So we have to work with as many sectors as possible to ensure the restoration. And Work Package 2 is helping us come up with a decision support tool where we put everything in one interactive mechanism so that we can see if we have done enough in terms of restoration and reducing flooding. So that's the overview of what we're doing with the Ridge to Coast in terms of our landscape, seascape attempt to restore the environment. Thank you. Back to you, Annadelle.
Thank you very much, Dr. Heidi. That's very, very nice, very informative. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions during the panel discussion. We now proceed to the video presentation. This is the presentation. Please proceed.
For the past 20 years, a sustained rise, frequency, and intensity of climate-related disasters such as floods and droughts have threatened people's lives and livelihood. Poor communities in both rural and urban areas are more vulnerable and have more difficulty to recover from these extreme events. In 2011, the Cagayan de Oro River Basin, or CDORB, was struck by Typhoon Washi. There was massive flooding in the river basin and its delta. The flood resulted in an overall damage of approximately $104 million in all sectors of affected areas, with 674 fatalities and about 1,000 people missing.
The last few days as a result of this storm, and that is what can kill.
Stuck in these conditions for what could be a very long time. What's being done to help? Is aid getting in?
The extent of losses and damages are linked to the decline in the condition of the upland areas in Bukidnon and the rapid urbanization in the downstream community of Cagayan de Oro. Massive agro-industrial plantations, encroachment, timber poaching, and unsustainable farming practices have contributed to the degradation of the headwaters of CDORB. Without forest cover, the integrity of the river basin as a life support system is in danger. Recognizing how interconnected these ecosystems are, collective efforts among stakeholders are needed to halt the further destruction of forest resources and increase the resiliency of the community. 2019, the downstream area of Cagayan de Oro City passed its Payments for Ecosystem Services, or PS Ordinance, allocating $200,000 annually for the restoration activities in the upland and critical watersheds of CDORB. Another major financial contributor for the catchment restoration is the Cagayan de Oro Water District, or COWD, which suffered heavy damages during the Sandong floods in 2011. The water district is now cooperating with VEI, a Dutch water operator, to increase its resilience to flooding, improve its overall performance, and connect 7,000 additional households in Cagayan de Oro to water supply. This partnership, along with Partners for Sanitation and River Basin Restoration, forms the core of the Ridge to Coast Rain to Tap project. Such collaborative projects play a critical role in bringing in local and international cooperation, public and private partnerships, providing resources, expertise, knowledge, and policy support. Through the project, beneficiaries of the high mountain forest, mainly the upland communities, are supported to meet their basic needs and empowered to become participants in its protection. In the upland area of CDORB, a significant portion of the population are farmers, many of whom belong to the indigenous peoples community who live near the critical forest areas. By empowering these IP communities to become custodians of the forest, the communities will be able to adopt sustainable farming practices, participate in the reforestation activities, assist the local government in the protection of their forest lands from outsiders, and cultivate a sense of stewardship amongst community members, especially the youth. Thus, Hineleban Foundation Incorporated engages with these IP communities as valued partners for rainforestation. Despite the urgency of deforestation, these communities face more immediate challenges in their day-to-day lives, such as hunger and poverty. Without addressing these concerns, the success and sustainability of reforestation will be at risk. Hineleban's rainforestation program includes assistance to establish farms that will serve as the community's sustainable source of food and livelihood. Before any of these activities takes place, Hineleban obtains consent from the IP communities through a process known as the Participatory Cultural Impact Assessment or PCIA, in which the community is fully informed about the program and individuals are free to voice their concerns. Succeeding engagement activities revolve around making sure the program design is adapted to the community's particular context, especially for food security and livelihood. The food security component, known as the Family Food Security Cycle or FFSC, aims to help partner communities achieve non-cash dependent food security for each family member. The FFSC component is fundamentally designed to provide a family of 7 with enough nutritional food items to last them throughout the year. Farmers are taught on how to grow local crops using sustainable, climate-resilient, and organic methods, and how to manage livestock such as pigs, chickens, and goats to complete their farm system. The livelihood component, known as Sustainable Disposable Income Crops or SDIC, aims to help partner communities grow environmentally sustainable crops as a source of income. Hineleban trains its IP partners on how to grow climate-resilient, high-value crops such as adlay, coffee, bamboo, and abaca using methods that assure high-quality produce. To guarantee the farmers a good price, Hineleban assists its partner communities to connect directly to a transformational business partner which is able to process and market the products to high-end customers. Now that the community's basic needs are met, they are likely open, willing, capable, and empowered to reforest their areas. Hineleban's rainforestation method assures the tree's growth despite challenges presented by unfertile soil, competitive cogon grass fires, and harsh tropical weather. The replanting of trees has 2 phases. The first phase is the planting of pioneer species such as Caliandra calothersus to create an environment suitable for the growth of the tree's seedlings. Caliandra is able to compete with cogon grass and eventually eliminate the grass by shading while also providing nutrients to the soil. The Caliandra enriches the soil, acts as a fire line for the forest, and provides firewood for the community. In the second phase, the Caliandra is thinned to make space for the indigenous tree species. The trees are cared for by the community until they have grown past their critical period of growth. This becomes the foundation of a restored and permanent rainforest. It is easy to recognize that the destruction of our forests diminishes our natural defense against flooding, shortage of water supply, and poor sanitation, among many others. Yet, it continues at an alarming rate. As societies act towards a more sustainable future, it is important that we view reforestation as a tool in achieving resiliency in our society. The rainforestation approach in CDORB makes this possible with indigenous people upstream, private sector, and the community downstream. The community downstream provides resources for building the food security and the sustainable income cycles of the community upstream. A restored forest reduces the risk of flooding, provides a dependable source of water for farming and living, and ultimately builds the resiliency of society in the river basin.
as the rainforest approach to restoring the watershed with the indigenous people and to build resilient societies from upstream and to downstream. Our next speaker is Assistant Secretary Marshall Amaro. He has been nominated to be the Executive Director of the River Basin Control Office, RBCO, of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to fill in the position vacated by the retirement of the previous Executive Director. Despite the pending finalization of his appointment, he has agreed to participate in our session, and he has prepared a speech in reaction to the reforestation and the work that we have done so far. Unfortunately, something came up that he cannot join us today. His speech will be read by Ms. Apple Marie Vitug, the Project Monitoring and Evaluation Officer of RBCO. I give the floor now to Ms. Vitug.
Thank you, Dr. Anadel. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Forester Apple Marie Vitug, and I will be delivering the message of ASEC Amaro. To all the distinguished guests, participants, and everyone involved in this project, a blessed day to all. The River Basin Control Office, as mandated agency by virtue of Executive Order 510, Series of 2006, and EO 816, Series of 2009, serves as DENR's implementing, monitoring, and evaluation office of all DENR programs and projects within the river basins for effective and efficient management and governance of the country's river basins. Moreover, our BCO orchestrates and provides the overall direction and technical assistance in the implementation of policies, plans, and programs for the protection, conservation, management, and wise use of the country's river basins. River basins play an important role that cannot be disregarded as they contribute to the Philippine economy and provide water for life and allow animals, plants, industry, agriculture, and human settlements to exist. When Typhoon Sendong and Vinta devastated Cagayan de Oro, the Integrated River Basin Management and Development Master Plan was one of the byproducts of the various sectors working together to rehabilitate and develop CDORB. The RBCO would like to commend the management of the Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, headed by Executive Director Dr. Hili Ann Kiawit, DNR Region 10, headed by Red Arle Adorable, for continuously dedicating themselves to protecting, preserving, rehabilitating, and managing the Cagayan de Oro River Basin. May I also recognize and applaud the efforts of R2C R2T project partners, especially the VEI, Wetlands International, Hineleban Foundation Incorporated, for reducing the risk of flooding in the CDORB Work Package 2 under the R2C R2T project Sustainable Water Supply, especially the piloting of reforestation of the buffer zone of Mount Kitanglad and the riparian zone of Cagayan de Oro, establishing sustainable finance through payment for ecosystem services, market instrument, and increasing awareness and support with the use of a computer-based decision support tool. As demonstrated here in Cagayan de Oro River Basin, the partnerships between the private sector and the indigenous people, between the public and private sector, and among a variety of sectors in the multi-stakeholder platform are inspiring and worthy of replication in the 17 other major river basins in the Philippines, as it is in the mandate of the River Basin Control Office to promote integrated river basin management in the Philippines. I will encourage the regional offices of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to learn and program the implementation of rainforestation with pests, with indigenous people and stakeholders in upstream and downstream. I thank the Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, Hineleban Foundation Incorporated, and Wetlands International Philippines for spearheading this in Mindanao and in the Philippines. Maraming salamat at isang makakalikasang hapon po sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vito. Maraming salamat sa inyo. Please convey to Assistant Secretary Amaro our gratitude for his words of appreciation and his support for scaling up the rainforestation approach to other major river basins in the Philippines. We wish him well in his appointment, and we look forward to working with him and his staff in the RBCO in the remaining years of the RT2C, R2T project and beyond. This ends our session, part one of our session. We now proceed to part two, which is an interactive one. We will interview our three speakers in the panel, Dr. Kiawit, Ms. Perrine, and Mr. Guy Simons. I have introduced Dr. Kiawit to you before, and you have seen her present a talk. So now I proceed to introduce Ms. Georgia Perrine. Ms. Georgia Perrine is the manager of the elements of work package 2 that is actually directly involved in the restoration, the planting of trees in the forest and working with the people. She is also very capable as a person of integrity. And as mentioned by Dr. Hiley, she's the daughter of the founder of the Rainforestation with the Hineleban Foundation Incorporated and in the indigenous people in the farm in the Lirongan area. Mr. Guy Simon is the hydrologist, and he is the director of Future Water based in the Netherlands. He is our hydrologist for Reach the Coast Rain to Tap project. I will ask a few questions to our speakers while our attendees have the time to write their questions in the chat box. And we will read your questions after we have the interviews among our panelists. To start our forum, I have a question to address Georgia. Georgia, what motivated the Hineleban Foundation Incorporated in working with the community in restoring the forest?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Doc Canada for that question. So when Hineleban Foundation was founded and started to do its reforestation work, we quickly realized that you really cannot reforest the mountain ranges properly if you don't work closely with the communities who live beside the forests. So in the case of Bukidnon, those communities are the indigenous communities. And since that realization, when we started, we've been working very closely with the indigenous communities.
What were the challenges you faced with working with the communities?
So definitely, because these communities are generally quite isolated and marginalized, there tend to be higher levels of poverty and hunger. Another challenge would be that even if they have rich soil for farming, and many of them farm, there isn't enough of a connection, or whether it's physical or financial connection to a market or a buyer. And then of course with that, there's also challenges with in our own work. We have to always do our best to understand so that we can do the project properly.
That's good. How did you overcome any one of the challenges that you encountered?
So on the issue of the food security, we realized that actually a lot of the families, they have great soil, but maybe they didn't have access to materials, or they didn't have the knowledge to grow certain vegetables or certain crops. So we've been working very closely with the farmers, exchanging knowledge. They do have their own knowledge, so we've been exchanging knowledge and sharing knowledge and trying to provide support so that they can create food security gardens that would basically aim to help them achieve non-cash dependent food security throughout the year for the whole family. So that's been one of the measures we've taken for the food security. On the issue of access to market and cash poverty, we have tried to play a bridging role, and with the farmers who know their land and they have the area for the crops, they actually really just need that support link to a buyer who will buy a good quality product for a good amount. So this is what we call the Sustainable Disposable Income Crops Program. And so far, we've had really great success connecting coffee farmers and adlai farmers, or even introducing those crops in their communities and connecting them with a buyer. And so if you check it out, there's Hineleban Coffee and Hineleban Adlai, and those are doing really well, and a lot more goes back to the farmer compared to the usual cash crops.
Excellent. You are quite right. I see these products in the health shops here in Metro Manila, and they fetch a good price. I'm happy to hear that a lot of this income go back to the community.
Yes.
So thank you. May I turn now to Dr. Hailey. Dr. Hailey, the rainforestation approach for restoration of the forest has socioeconomic and ecological components that require resources, financial resources, and human resources. How are you marketing this holistic and promising approach to restore forests, watersheds, and in the riparian areas?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Annabelle. Actually, it's hard. It's a hard sell, and it's very hard to get the buy-in of the different members of the whole community in the river basin. So after so many attempts, we've sort of found that maybe we've found that if we use the angle of ecological services, where they can see that there is actually direct benefits, that tangible benefits that they can get from the environment, that sort of made them more involved in terms of working with us. So like, especially when they saw the effect of the regulating services in flooding and erosion. So that was something that we sort of latch on and focus on that. And then, so the second was, we realized that if, apart from telling them that the environmental services are not something that you should just take for granted, but you also have to take care of it, it's not something that infinite. We then sort of added the concept of an ecosystem-based approach, and where we told them, like, if you're a business entity in a downstream city, it doesn't mean you're okay and you don't need to help the upland indigenous groups, for example, because the reduction of flooding in the future and the disaster that it will cause will actually be reduced if we have this partnership with the upland communities. So we are quite successful in putting the advocacy across that when you talk about environment, it should not be political, but really more on an lens of an ecosystem. So I think those two finally convinced the business entities to work with us and join us in this advocacy.
Great. And among the activities that you have undertaken, what is the thing or the activity that inspired you the most?
I would say there are many, but one is when we did the lobbying with the politicians, we are more scientists by background and more from the academe. So we were quite naive, or you could say ignorant, in the political arena. But the lobbying has become a political issue. And in one instances, when we started to lobby, we said, like, if the local city can really put in an ordinance that each of the netizen would pay 5 pesos for rewarding the environment. And that particular simple thing became a political issue because of three things. One is that then many of the local community said that's too expensive. For those who are not Filipinos, that's only 10 cents US dollar, but they can buy cigarettes and buy soft drinks, no? But they cannot allocate 5 pesos a month. Second is that what's interesting is that the youth councillor made a quite sensational remark in the news, and it was good because he said it's unfortunate that our sustainability in the future for the youth is only cost at 5 pesos. So are we that cheap? Our lives is that cheap in terms of ensuring that we have water and the environment is still available for us. So that was very interesting. And the third was that we learned that for many of the councillors, they were like doing a political suicide, because if they will push for the advocacy for paying, meaning they would lose voters, but they also have to think of the other voters that are pro-environment. So that was really interesting for us. It was like going into the political arena, and we were not like ready for it. And the second one was, we did this greening pinning event where we put in a big map, and where we asked all those who have restoration activities to pin in that big map where they have the restoration. And it's basically to show to these people that we're not starting from scratch. There are actually many efforts to restore already. We just need to do more. So those two activities are very, you could say, important for me.
Yeah, and it gave a lot of lessons too.
Yeah.
Here's another question from one of our viewers coming all the way from Austria for you, Dr. Hadi. Is there an opportunity for the indigenous groups to regularly engage directly with the municipality, perhaps regular reporting on results in the uplands and vice versa, from municipalities to indigenous groups? Or is this information exchange always mediated through CBO RBMC?
Yes. Thank you so much. All the way to
From David Hobart Coleman.
Thank you, David, for that interest. Actually, in our system in the government, we have what we call as a municipal indigenous representative. So meaning to say each local government has to get a recommendation from the indigenous community, and they will decide who will represent them in the government. So that's one avenue. But again, over time, it has become political in a way, because some of these representatives are not representing the community anymore, but more what the mayor or the local chief executive is doing. So that's one in terms of the municipal level. We also have a facility where we mentioned earlier, the PCIA. So we have a national indigenous office that's supposed to work with them as well. But what we realize now, and this is coming from the indigenous brothers and sisters of ours, is that they prefer more this multi-stakeholder platform, because it has no political inclinations, it's not biased, and they can really say what they want to say. So a number of the issues we have already raised to the government through the platform.
Thank you. Another final question to you. This is from Kashif Shad, and he wants to know the demonstration impact of the protection at the scale at the time required for benefits. What are your reflections on creating a long-term vision that allowed you to convert intent into actual monetary contributions?
Oh, that's a bit of a heavy question.
Yeah, it's quite profound. Huh?
Yeah, very profound. We call it in the Philippines, it's a Miss Universe question. Yeah.
You are a Miss Universe.
We're in terms of the demonstration sites. We are not so mature yet. So unfortunately, we're just like, basically we started around 2015, 2016. So many of our demonstration sites are still like you would say maturing in terms of ecological succession on that, but we're already monitoring it. And this is where the role of guys here and the project where with this monitoring, we will input it in this interactive tool and see in terms of the growth, the crown level, or all those stuff. Unfortunately, we haven't done it yet, but we will actually pursue it because it's part of the package in terms of the restoration that we will be doing. But as of now, unfortunately, we cannot provide. But I think Dr. Annadel can provide some inputs regarding the growth and the monitoring for those demonstration sites that I've shown, the one with the Partners for Resilience project. So I'm throwing
Yes.
it back to her.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, even after 1 year, the trees grow. The trees grow as well as the other plants that you grow with them. So it has an impact on the lives of the people. It starts to hold on, the trees start to hold on to the soil, prevents erosion. The fruit trees start to bear fruits and become a source of income for the community. So it has benefits. And indeed, we need to make methodical monitoring of this socioeconomic benefits and monetize it and be part of the benefits that we can share for the restoration of the forest. And this is a very good segue to one of the components of package 2, which actually we didn't have time for elaboration, but it's been mentioned that hydrological modeling and decision support tool is one of the tools, a scientific basis for the targeted restoration of parts of the river basin that Dr. Heidi has mentioned. So I'd like to pose some questions to guys, our hydrologists. How do you view the rainforestation approach? Will it contribute to water security and building resilient societies based on your experience from around the world?
Yes, thank you very much, Annabelle. So thanks for having me on the panel, of course. Yes, the relation between forests and reforestation and water security is quite intense, but also quite complex. In general, I think what you see all across the world is that it has forests provide very important regulating ecosystem services related to water. So when it comes to mitigating peak flows through enhanced infiltration of water into the soil, percolation to the groundwater, this is something you see in most areas around the world, as well as having increases in water availability during the dry seasons, really restoring these natural hydrological patterns. That's something that reforestation can play an important role in. When it comes to water availability on annual timescales, sometimes you see that because of having more biomass, the evapotranspiration, the water consumption from the forests is a bit higher than the land use, land cover that was present before. But that also, again, plays a role in generating rainfall and precipitation, which is a bit more difficult to monitor, but also, of course, very important component of the water cycle. So this is a very, very direct and very important link between forest cover and water security, indeed.
So I presume you reviewed the HMDST part of the work package 2 as a very important part of the whole restoration in the landscape in Cagayan de Oro River Basin. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's what is interesting, I think, as Dr. Haile was also just referring to. I think within the work package 2 of our project, I think the modeling also plays an important role in extending time series of impacts, basically. So there's all kinds of activities in the field, also all kinds of monitoring activities, but using hydrological models can help to get an even better idea of the benefits to be had. And then also, once you have some quantitative estimate of these benefits, you can also more easily convince stakeholders of the importance of these efforts, and also maybe generate this buy-in into payment for ecosystem services systems or other mechanisms. So in terms of making things more tangible, making things more quantitative, it can play an important role. And then, of course, in our project, there is also the decision support tool that is being developed around the models. And that's basically the interface where stakeholders and the general audience can interact with these the outcomes of these analysis.
Thank you. And there's another question now coming from the Netherlands, from Michel Slotema. He sends greetings from the Netherlands. We have all seen the recent publication of the IPCC report and the urgency to upscaling resilience initiatives. What is needed to upscale this initiative, ours, but also how to move from a project to an integrated program approach so that the lesson and results are not lost at the end of the project. Each one of you can answer the question. I give the floor first to Dr. Heidi.
Thank you, Michelle. The one is part of the design of this project is once we are done with the decision support tool and some of these activities, we're gonna have a national forum and a regional, meaning Mindanao-wide forum, where we will have the lessons learned from what we're doing, and especially this decision support tool that will really aid the multi-stakeholder platform, have this analytical or technical way to decide which are the areas we should prioritize for restoration, and how far are we in terms of hitting the impact, like we wanted reduced flooding. So that's one in terms of the scaling up. And the second is, that's why if you notice, we really work with the River Basin Central Office of our country, because as you're correct, we're only project-based, and even for us, we're only a multi-stakeholder platform, and we don't know if we will sustain over years, but that's what we are ensuring, is that we have the knowledge, but we don't have the power. So it's really the government that will do it. So we hope that the River Basin Central Office will work with us in terms of institutionalizing some of these good practices and strategies to help other river basin management groups in the country. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, IPCC, by the way, is IPCC stands for
Intergovernmental Panel
on Climate Change.
On climate change, yes. And guys,
yes, but well, related to the question, well, my component in the project, and also my expertise in general, relates mainly to this decision support tool and the model, of course. So I'll respond from that perspective. I think indeed the DST, the decision support tool that is being developed, can also definitely support upscaling, and I think a good strategy for upscaling would be to first try to also apply the framework that we develop at the DST to neighboring river basins, to similar initiatives in the Philippines, where with, I would say, relatively little effort, once we get to the point that the DST has been finalized, it can also be applied in similar settings, and the outreach can be enhanced of what we advocate.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to hear from Ms. Vito that Assistant Secretary Amaro will support our scaling up efforts in the future. I'm afraid that we are running out of time. So I want to thank our panelists for their responses to our questions. They're quite enlightening. And to our audience, our attendees, for raising critical questions, provocative questions, and generating good discussion. I now would like to invite my co-convener, Adrian, to give the closing remarks. Adrian.
Yes, let's see, do you have me in view? Yeah, hello. Well, working for Wij, a Dutch water operator mainly focusing on water supply, the core of our cooperation is with the Cagayan de Oro Water District. And that means pumps, pipes, hydraulics, those kind of things. But we realized early on that Cagayan de Oro Water District was heavily hit by the flooding. And we didn't just want to work on this in an infrastructural way, so how to protect the assets of the water district. We wanted to work in a more holistic approach. And the grant of the Sustainable Water Fund, the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, really gave that opportunity to apply for a project that has a very integrated nature. So the work that was described today by all of you is mainly under work package 2. There are 2 other work packages also. And it focuses on reducing the risks of flooding through the restoration of forests along the watershed and along the river. And it shows great promise to operationalize the integrated river basin management of the Cagayan de Oro River Basin. Now, we intend for this to be replicated, both from a technological aspect, like Gijs explained, but also maybe more importantly, from an institutional perspective. Proven impact in Cagayan de Oro will serve as convincing evidence to the adjacent river basins in Mindanao to adopt similar practices. And indeed, the Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, as it is already a front runner in the Philippines, paving the way for other river basins and river basin management councils in the Philippines to implement similar organization structures, methodologies, and restoration approaches. We're really looking forward to continued cooperation with our partners, the Hineleban Foundation, Cagayan de Oro River Basin Management Council, and Wetlands International, as well as the Cagayan de Oro the Cagayan de Oro Water District for the remaining years to come. We also hope that the sharing today has inspired the viewers and the stakeholders, water resource managers to adopt these kind of tools, rainforestation, payment for ecosystem services, and integrated river basin management to build resilient communities upstream, downstream, and throughout the river basin. Now, we'd like to invite you all to learn more about the partnership between the private sector and the communities. We have another session in which we are co-facilitating. It's a session facilitated by the RVO, session 9686, titled Public-Private Potential, Incremental Project Innovations for Resilience and Impact. It's on August the 26th at 7 a.m. European time or 1 p.m. Philippine time. So finally, as I close the session, I'd like to thank the speakers, the panelists, and of course the audience for your participation and questions. Thank you very much to everyone around the world.